Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Well, I'm excited to welcome to the Legacy Builders podcast my friend and our Mayor of Murfreesboro, Shane McFarland. Shane, good to have you on.
Yeah, man, great to be here. Good to see you.
Well, before we just dive right in, just want to kind of generally set this up. So you've been Mayor of Murfreesboro since 2010. So you're going on, is that right, 2010?
Yeah.
You probably took office in...
No, it's actually 2014.
14,
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going on just over 11 years, and next year's an election year, so maybe hanging signs around town. But grew up in Grundy County, went to Grundy County High School, went to school at MTSU.
MTSU. Moved to Murfreesboro to come to MTSU.
Brought you here, and you've stuck around.
Yeah, they couldn't get rid of me. So yeah, my brother and I both came down in '92 to go to MTSU, which moving from Monteagle, to Murfreesboro,
the big city.
Yeah, it was like moving to New York City.
Yeah,
so
that's like me. We were just before we got going, just talking about our backgrounds, because you're from Grundy, I'm from Hardeman County.
Yeah,
and we've got this thing in Tennessee that they call distress counties, and there's all these different levels, and both of us grew up in a distressed county. Hardeman is where I grew up in West Tennessee, still considered that. And I went off to Knoxville, so it was like major culture shock for me.
Yeah,
going from Bolivar, Tennessee to Knoxville, 6 hours away from home. So, well, like we do with every guest to kind of kick off the conversation, obviously this is called Legacy Builders. So we kick it off with every guest by asking them, what does the word legacy mean to you, and how has that shaped your life and your work?
Yeah, I've never been, most people think from a legacy standpoint of like, what you leave behind, what your people remember you by. And I've never been like a huge legacy person on, I want to do this so people will remember me because of this. I really thought about that when you sent me, hey, here are things we're going to be talking about. And to me, when I think of legacy, it's my family. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of the things that we do, whether it be politically or through work, they're important. But I don't think there's anything more important than looking at your kids and seeing, the legacy you leave behind is how they are to others, sort of the things they do. So, but I mean, politically, we all have a legacy.
Sure.
We have things that are built or priorities or policies you put into place.
Yeah.
I mean, if I look at it from a personal standpoint, family is super important to me. But
Mm-hmm.
then if you look at it from a city standpoint, I think trying to manage, and the way I look at it, the legacy, if people think about, my service, it's been, Murfreesboro was a safe place, or is a safe place to live. Yeah. Murfreesboro is a diverse community, and our number one thing that we deal with is transportation and traffic. So mm-hmm. It would like to be a legacy of that we built a bunch of roads.
Yeah. I think somebody told me recently that outside of the state of Tennessee, it might have been you that told me this, or I heard you say this somewhere maybe, that outside of the state of Tennessee, Murfreesboro is the number 2 like road builder in the state, or something along those lines, which wouldn't surprise me.
No, I mean, if you look at Thompson Lane, for example, that's a $150 million project to be the largest project ever undertaken in Murfreesboro. So I mean, I would not doubt that at all.
Yeah. I think I can imagine from and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but from your vantage point, some frustrations, with what people get frustrated about that may frustrate you.
Yeah.
Just having kind of dabbed my toe into your world a little bit last year.
Yeah.
Just the confusion of, I was surprised at the amount of people that don't realize our main kind of thoroughfares in town, Broad Street, Memorial, Highway 99, Highway 96,
Highway 231.
Highway 231. All those are state roads.
Yeah.
And I think most of it's because most people say Franklin Road or most people say Broad Street. They're not using the highways locally, at least.
If it has a number in front of it, it's a state road.
Yeah. And so you guys can't just go stick a shovel in the ground and start widening roads without, the state.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you don't even Thompson Lane, that's a state road. Bradyville Pike. Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22. I watched your interview with Senator Reeves, and our delegation fights really hard to get funding for road projects in Tennessee. I mean, we were just recently awarded roughly another $30+ million to widen Old Fort Parkway and then the new Cherry Lane interchange on 840. And man, it's a catch-22 because all of those roads are state roads, and typically those state projects take longer than local projects.
Right.
We can move quicker, we move faster, but just like that we're fighting for road projects in Murfreesboro, there's 95 other counties that are fighting for those same funds.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that people may not like to hear this, but we've got people. I believe in staying in our lane. I mean, and so I'm going to advocate for funds for Murfreesboro. But when I get out of my lane and start criticizing people at the state level, that hurts us on trying to get funding.
Right.
When, the squeaky wheel doesn't always get the grease in political funding. And so, like 99, I mean, that was a project that was a very challenging project, took a little longer, but at the end of the day, we're just thankful that they gave us funding to be able to work on those projects.
Right. Yep.
So.
That's good. Well, let's talk a little bit before we kind of dive more into your role as mayor and, the past, roughly 10 years that you've been able to serve. What made you kind of the man you are? I've talked a little bit about, in earlier episodes, my background and upbringing, and you've already kind of talked about, grew up in Grundy County, but kind of give us some insight into growing up, high school, college, kind of what you studied, and kind of your early career.
Yeah, I mean, my brother and I were the first two people in our family to go to college. I think that was really something my mom and dad really focused on, telling us, like, look, we didn't do this, but we want you to do this. So it was really never an option. And coming from a really small town, I mean, I think Mont Eagle at the time maybe had 1,500, 2,000 residents. And you talk about who made you what you are, and I mean, my mom and dad are super close. I mean, I'm still super close to them. And my dad graduated. Mom and dad, it took me into my senior year in high school to try to put my birthday and their anniversary date together, and they didn't really coincide together. So my parents had Sean and I when they were 18.
Yeah.
And so it was really kids, raising kids.
Yeah.
And when Ashley and I have been married, it'll be 26 years in August. And I remember going to my mom and dad's 20-year wedding anniversary, together. So I think it's 20 or 25, but Dad graduated high school, and he drove a coal truck, and then taught auto mechanics at Grundy High School.
Okay.
And then got a job as a teller at a bank, and then worked his way up in a local community bank from teller all the way up to the top. And
that's great.
And then my mom was an EA basically. And so she went around through the state. I think it was a state that she went to different low income houses and taught fine motor skills to kids that were in their homes. And so early childhood intervention, I think is what it was called at that time. And, she went to some of the toughest and poorest homes that you would go to. I mean, I remember telling, my dad's a car freak, like all his cars are clean. And so that, I remember Mom telling the story that she came out and there was a goat on the hood of one of Dad's cars at one time. And so, but then, let me turn this off. I'm sorry, Matt. So Sean and I then decided I was going to go to Tennessee Tech.
Yeah.
Sean had was going to MTSU, and then I changed like 2 weeks before school and came to MTSU. And I mean, the rest is history. So I graduated with an accounting degree, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I figured with an accounting degree, you really could do anything in business. And so my twin brother, he is science oriented, and I'm not. And I'm more, numbers and all those things. Yeah. And so, man, so we graduated. Sean went off to University of Memphis to go to pharmacy school, and then I stayed here. Went to work Pro South. There was a sporting goods store that opened up. My first job was as manager of Pro South. Scotty Adcock had opened that, so I worked with Scotty, and then got a job with a guy that was a real estate agent, but did development on the side. Mm-hmm. And man, the rest is history.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you kind of get into that world, and I guess fast forward a little bit to 2013, 2014. What made you want to run for office?
Yeah, I started with the city in 2000. I got appointed to the planning commission. Yeah. And I'll say this, I think most all of our council members have served on the planning commission, and the planning commission really makes you a good council member because you sort of understand the process. And I was appointed on planning commission, I think in the year 2000. And then I served on planning commission until about 2004. And then that's when I ran for city council. And I was elected to city council. It was either 2004 or 2006. Maybe, I think it was 2006. And so I served 2 terms on city council. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I ran for mayor in 14. Tommy Bragg was the mayor for 2 terms that I served with. And then he decided not to run. And then I ran against Ron Washington, who was a council member for a long time, and still talk to Ron routinely, still talk to Mayor Bragg routinely. But that was really the steps. And I think everything happens for a reason. But I mean, I was, golly, at the time, so what, it's 12, I mean, I was 37, 38 when I was first elected mayor. And really looking back, I'm a better mayor now, or a better elected official now than I was when, you got to figure when I was elected in 2006. So what's that, 20 years ago? I mean, it's 29 years old, 30 years old.
Yeah. And
still I look back and I see some of the things that I did, and I just sort of shake my head. It's probably not the smartest thing in the world.
So, I mean, you've seen obviously a tremendous amount of change here in that over decade of service. So what would you say are some of the most significant ways that Murfreesboro has changed since you first took office? Yeah,
it's interesting because when I first moved here in 92, they had just built Rutherford Boulevard. I mean, there was no street lights on Rutherford. There was nothing there. Because that's the way we would come in from back home. We would go Manchester Highway, and then we would take a right on Rutherford to get to MTSU. I think the significant milestones Murfreesboro, it's just the central location that we have, and quality of life. I mean, it's right. Once you move here, you start seeing how good the people are. But the population in 1992 was around 40,000 people, and I think we're probably 180 right now. Mm-hmm. So trying to manage that growth, and that's typically what I see. I'm not from here, and I think sometimes it's disheartening because we've had so many people who moved here, but there's a lot of people who complain because they don't want anybody else to move here, even though that they moved here.
Right.
And that's a really tough thing that we try to manage. And I think there are things that I think it's important as an elected official that we say the things that we got right and the things that we got wrong. Mm-hmm. I think 25 years ago, before my time, there were some zoning decisions that I wish we could go back. I think the amount of what I call garden style apartments that are out in like St. Andrews Drive. I mean, I wish I could go back and we could say, no, that's a bad decision. So I think looking at those challenges that we've had have probably been the toughest thing, because you're growing so fast. But our growth rate now is down right around 2%, a little under 2%, and that's a manageable number. The 10% a year is not a manageable number.
So how would you say you have balanced growth and development and kind of still protecting kind of that character, small town feel that a lot of people love about Murfreesboro?
I think there's really a couple things. The character and small town feel, I think it comes through a couple different things. One, the downtown area, because that's what people really identify Murfreesboro as far as our character and our community. It's really that downtown proper. So we've really tried hard to put a focus on the downtown area. Yeah. And then secondly, I think the things that define community are, when you think about where do people gather, where do people see each other, it's schools and parks. Yeah. And that's something that we've really focused on, especially the Parks and Recreation side, that upkeeping and adding and investing in the Parks and Recreation system. Yeah. And that was way before my time. But I tell people when they move to Murfreesboro and they fuss about Parks and Recreation, I'm like, you moved to the wrong city, because we have put a priority on that really for the last 50 years to, Veterans Park's under construction, and that's going to be huge for the west side of town.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a balancing act, because I said this to the Home Builders Association. I spoke to them the other day with Mary Esther Reed, the mayor of Smyrna, and I think COVID really fast-forwarded
the need.
It fast-forwarded these discussions, because so many people moved from the West Coast and the East Coast. Yeah. And a lot of people from California, New York, Chicago, all moved down here. And we were joking that the meme that said, hey, we want to welcome all of our people who've moved here from during COVID and to help you navigate our city better, or state better. This was a state meme. It said, to help you navigate the state of Tennessee better, we want to give you a road map, and you click on it, it's the state of Kentucky. So that's the part where what we have. But I mean, here's the thing too, Matt. I mean, we live in a free country, and we just can't, put a sign out that says, hey, we're full, don't come here. Yeah. That's just not the country we live in. And one of the things, there are things I know that we have to focus on, and especially when I read social media posts and those things. But one of the things I don't think we apologize for is, you look at people's home values and what they've done over the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, I think just in 1 year or a 2-year period, they went up like 50%. Yeah. And so I think that's, people's main source of wealth is what they have in their home. And that really has been a positive. Like I would not want to be sitting here and explaining to you why that your home value's gone down over an 8-year period. And we've just not seen that. Yeah.
Well, having come from where I grew up in rural West Tennessee, I was actually just talking to Trent before you got here about this. The people where I grew up would, as we say in the South, give an arm and a leg to have the type of opportunity that we have in a city like this, because they've not seen. I mean, my parents are moving here. They close on their house in about a month from Bolivar, and they've seen maybe a 40 or 50% increase in equity, but over a 30-year period. They've been in this house that they're selling for 32 years. Yeah. and we've seen that type of growth in less than 5 years. Yeah. And so I don't want to, when I hear people talk about that, I'm just like, like you say, we live in a free country, and there's other areas of the state that would kill to have the type of opportunity that we have here.
You can drive an hour in any direction from Murfreesboro, and you can find people that don't have job opportunities. They don't have shopping opportunities. I mean, they don't have healthcare opportunities like we do here in our community. I mean, that's one of the segments in Murfreesboro over the last 15 years that has really excelled is our healthcare community. I mean, now you have people from Grundy County, from Coffee County, from Bedford, from Cannon, all these all these people come into Murfreesboro for their health care now.
Yeah.
And that's, when I was growing up in Monteagle, we drove to Hickory Hollow. That's where we went.
Yeah.
So I think there are some challenges, and look, I'm not sitting in front of you and saying that everything's peachy rosy in Murfreesboro and there's nothing that we don't need to work on. But I mean, the other part too, we've had one tax increase in 27 years. Mm-hmm. And I know people find that hard to believe, but that is the truth. We had a revenue increase in 2018 because we had to build a school.
Yeah.
Name a community that you live in that's happened. Nashville, I think I just saw where they're getting ready to increase like 16%
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, our tax rate has gotten down into the 90-cent range, which is really hard to maintain a budget like that.
Which you could probably attribute to the growth.
Yeah, sales tax. I think we had typically been on a 50-50 sales tax to property tax, and I think we're now a lot closer to 60-40 sales tax than property tax.
Yeah.
So there's been some really positive things with the growth in our community, and there's been some negative things as well, but we try to balance that out.
So over the past, let's just talk, I guess, more on your tenure as mayor.
Yeah.
What are some of the things, projects, initiatives that you would say, here's 2 or 3 things or one thing that I'm most proud of?
Yeah. People will ask that.
This is your pitch.
Yeah. It's like, that The Office, I'm a big Office guy. Like I watch The Office there's a couple of shows every year that I watch all the way through. I watch West Wing every single year, and maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And then I watch The Office, and Andy, in the Office says, how come you don't know it's the good old days when you're in, what is it that you wish you knew you were in the good old days when you're in the good old days?
Yeah.
And I don't really ever think about, hey, this is what you've done, just because you're in the middle of trying to keep going. I think that's what most, in my opinion, most entrepreneurs don't sit back and like puff their chest out like, hey. So I don't really ever think about, there's a few things I don't really ever think about, like, here's our history. There's a few things I think that if I had to say, here are some things I'm proud of, and I don't, it's not just me, it's the entire city council, it's our entire leadership team.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that the mayor of Murfreesboro is a part-time job.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job, but it's a part-time job.
Yeah.
We have put such a significant investment and emphasis on public safety. Mm-hmm. It'd be hard pressed to find a community that's had the amount of raises that we've had for our police, our fire, our dispatchers, our EMS. So that's something I'm really proud of. We're, for the first time since I've been in elected office, we're 100% full in our police department and our public safety. So, you look at the investment that we've had in new fire stations and new police headquarters. And all those investments are great, but that's just stuff. The people are what you invest in. So I'm really proud of that. The other thing I think that's significant is when you look at the amount of infrastructure that we've put in place. It's never enough. But a lot of that infrastructure that we've partnered with, developers have paid for that infrastructure, not the taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And, I tell people, like, if we had to put all the infrastructure in place at one time and the taxpayer had to pay for it, you couldn't afford to live in this city. Yeah. So there's a balance with that. So the amount of road projects, and then the downtown, that's a significant area. We've invested $250 million in the downtown area over the last 6 or 8 years. That includes the judicial building, but that's something that we've been very, very proud of. And you look at the Parks and Recreation system and what's happened over the last really 10 to 12 years, and that's a miracle-filled, great example of a partnership that. You drive by there I drive by there daily. You drive by there and you see people out there and you're like, okay, we got that one right. Mm-hmm. That's one that's non-negotiable. I know we got it right. Yeah. But, I'm not really as focused on what we've done. I'm more focused on what we need to do. Yeah. And then there will be time when, I don't do this anymore, that we can look back and say, here's what we did. But this from being, I think, a leader, and I try to teach my boys this, and I'm back to coaching baseball again, that I honestly I'd give up being mayor tomorrow if I could be a full-time baseball coach. I enjoy that so much, but it's one of those things in leadership. And I tell this to our team that we work with. It's slow to take credit and quick to take blame. And, as an elected official and as mayor, I probably get too much credit for things that our team did. And I probably get too much blame for things that I really didn't have a say in, but that's part of it. And that's part of being an elected official.
Yeah. One of the things you said made me think of this might be a good opportunity to communicate to some of the folks, because one of the things that I hear people say a lot is, well, why can't they just build the roads before the growth happens?
Yeah.
Which sounds real easy, right? And but tell people why it's not practical. And you kind of alluded to it, but
yeah, I mean, we've done that a lot. I mean, Veterans Parkway is a great example.
Exactly.
That's about an 11-mile road that we built. Rutherford Boulevard is a great example. Fortress and Manson Pike is a great example of a road that we built. Medical Center Parkway, that's another example of a road we built. But when you're talking about a lot of these different, the majority of the roads that we need significant help on are all major thoroughfare roads that are state projects that we continually work on. But I mean, the issue is a lot of this comes in, the majority of water and sewer that's laid inside the city of Murfreesboro, it's laid by the private sector. And what I would say is you've got a lot of people who are, it's all saying, look, we need to partner with the private sector more to alleviate taxpayer burden. And that's what we try to do on infrastructure inside the city. Because, if you come through with a project and you're going to install $5 to $10 million worth of infrastructure and widen roads and do those things, well, it's much better on the taxpayer that we do that in conjunction with you. I mean, a great example, it took forever, but we finally helped recruit Trader Joe's to come in the community.
Yeah.
You go and you look at that road, Robert Rose Drive, that was built by the private sector. The widening was the area, the roads behind Trader Joe's and the roads all around that really needed to be built. The developers paid for those.
Yeah.
And then now you've got a business that we're able to get a significant source of tax revenue with sales tax.
Yeah.
And the public didn't put any funds into that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a balance.
Yep.
But like Cherry Lane, for example, that is going to be a transformational road that we're building from Memorial all the way back to 840. That will be a government-funded project.
Right.
And then we hope that some of the things that come around that will help pay for that road. So it's a balance. And that's what I tell the people who, will fuss about the infrastructure is if we went through and we said, look, we are going to put everything in place, then the taxpayer is the one who has to do that, and it's borrowed money. So there's a good balance with that, Matt.
So let's just talk about the role, just leadership in general. I mean, obviously you've ran a company, you ran the city for the past, over a decade. What are some of the, give us some insight as to some of the most difficult decisions over the past, maybe even on council too.
Yeah.
And then how you've kind of managed those, especially it's obviously no secret that we live in a just massively polarized society.
Yeah.
And even things such as roads that you would think would be this kind of bipartisan thing somehow managed to become political.
Yeah. I mean, the political environment over the last 15 years has completely changed. I think social media, the advent of social media really changed a lot of that, because you have these hit and run things now that you don't have the communication like you and I sitting here. Because I would like to think if you didn't agree with some of the stuff with the city, you're probably going to be more diplomatic with us talking about it than you are just putting a post out there that you don't have to talk to that person face to face.
Right.
So I think those have been some of the tougher things, but I've worked with 5 city managers now, Mr. Haley, Rob Lyons, Jim Crumley, Craig Tyndall, and now Darren Gore. And one of the reasons I think that Murfreesboro has been successful is we really hadn't had these ups and downs. It's been a very steady, sort of steady ride. And that's part because we have good staff in place and a good team in place. There have been a lot of difficult discussions and different things. And I'll say it in one or two things. One, I've tried really hard to be open and transparent and, doing these town hall meetings or doing these virtual meetings, and I try to always respond when people send emails or call. I mean, that's your job. And so if you don't want to do that as an elected official, you shouldn't do it. But I mean, you go back, and I think the two toughest things that just pop out to me in 2000, I think it was 17 or 18, we had that group right after Charlottesville happened that we ended up having this White Lives Rally group that that wanted that. I mean, they wasn't that they wanted, they came, and there were a lot of people who were just saying, you can't let them come, you got to shut it down. And that's, as much as I hated and did not agree with what they were saying,
right?
Our thoughts, and then the people that are advising you and the council at the time, they had a legal right to come. That's the world we live in. I say the world we live in, the country we live in, that we've got freedom of speech, and you may not like what I say, but I have the right to say that as long as I'm not hurting anyone, or you can't yell fire in a movie. So, and my thought with that was, if we shut down a group like this, we're going to be dealing with every radical group like this every weekend that's going to come and say, hey, hopefully the Murfreesboro will shut them down. We can sue them too. So, we went through and we collaborated with all these different groups, and the county worked together. And I mean, now that the way that we handle that is now the model in the country on how you handle those types of events. And I'll never forget, I still saved it. Sean Hackinson, who owns the alley, I didn't know Sean very well at the time. And Sean sent me this long text that said, hey, I'm not trying to suck up, but I thought you had lost your mind when, you didn't do X. And he said, I appreciate and respect how that this was handled. And I was wrong, and man, I still save that just because it was uplifting. But then the other thing, man, is being a mayor during COVID. Holy crap. And that was the thing that most people didn't understand, that I say this jokingly, but you always hear that, crap rolls downhill. Well, I mean, local government is at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
And that was rough.
Yeah.
Trying, every day, I learned so much during COVID on different ways to handle things, but that was I mean, it changed daily. Yeah. And now getting, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, but now the information that comes out, that's coming out now on some of the things that happen internally in the federal government, it just pisses me off because those individuals and bureaucrats that were at the Washington level have no idea how that affected us at the local level. Right. We're working with a school system trying to figure out, we had, I think it was 38 individual sites that we were trying to get kids fed. And a lot of people don't realize this, that in our school system, you've got a lot of kids that if they don't get breakfast and lunch, they don't eat that day.
Yeah. At the
schools.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about free and reduced lunch, or we can talk about things that, may have been better or not, but I mean, that was the fact. And so our school and our city came together to continue those programs in place. And then, the decisions that were made to shut down healthcare, or not healthcare, but gyms and restaurants. And you look back at some of that stuff now, and I mean, it infuriates me to see, we just wanted to have credible and honest information. Yeah. So that was really really tough. And I know that was tough at the governor's level, that, Governor Lee was dealing with that. That was passed down to where the executive order that he put in place, that basically the county mayors were over all the things that happened in, there's 4 counties inside the state, 4 or 5 that are metro that are, and those, they're not part of the county health department process, But, what he did is he basically said the county health department or the county mayor is in charge of setting all these policies. And ultimately, it was a good biblical lesson on not being in control and not having your faith in other things. Because I say this routinely, like, man, if you're putting your faith in an elected official, we're going to let you down every single time because we're human.
Yeah.
And that was a significant challenge going through that.
Yeah. I think most leaders who were in a position of leadership at that time would agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I had Brady Cooper, pastor at New Vision, on recently, and that was one of the things that he said was most challenging in his past decade or more of ministry and leadership is navigating that in a polarized society, and you had people that on all different sides of everything during that time, and his perspective is like, I'm just trying to make what I feel is the best decision for church family, community, that, from people that I trust, which, to navigate those things.
I mean, I've learned things that if that came around, that definitely would have been done differently or been more vocal about our community, because I don't think we have yet to see the damage that was done shutting the schools down. I mean, I think you're going to see that in test scores for the next many, many years to come, because some of these kids got so far behind. And I think that's the thing, like with churches as well. I mean, like we were routinely, and when I say routinely, I'm talking multiple times a day, talking with Gordon at St. Thomas, and everybody was just scared. And so I hope that there's I'm sure that won't be the last pandemic that we have. I hope. Yeah. I hope it's not in my lifetime. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things you alluded to earlier, I think we should go back to and kind of parse out for people who may not understand or want to understand better this role of mayor and city manager.
Yeah.
And how that works. You've obviously served with several at this point, but kind of what are those roles like? And I'm sure you've worked with each of them differently, but what is kind of the primary role as mayor, and then what's the city manager's role? I mean, we've had Craig on here, but I don't even know that I asked him that specifically.
Yeah. We have what's called a council manager form of government, and you have the mayor, 6 council members, my vote's just like everybody else's. And then there are 4 people who answer to the city council: the city manager, the city attorney, city judge, and now city recorder / finance director. And those are the only people that if we wanted to come in on a Thursday night and say we want to make a change, that's the only people that answer to the city council. Everyone else, police chief, fire chief, you name it, they all answer to the city manager. There's a positive with that. The positive is positions are hired based upon the most qualified person getting the job, not the most political person getting the job, which happens if you have an elected official.
That's appointing everybody.
Yeah, you're appointing your team, your people, right? It may be somebody who helped you with your campaign. It may be, that's not the way it is in city government. I think that's one of the reasons that you see that the people we've had here, in our city have been here 20 plus years that are managing their departments. The negative with that is that most people in our community think that those people answer to the city council. So it's really a hybrid, and it's a challenging thing that we have to make sure as we're having these discussions. And I think this is what's been really good with the city managers that we have in place, is that we have the relationship with that city manager to say, look, we understand that these people answer to you and you hire these people, but like we need to be communicated with, that we know what you're doing, so we can all be on the same page, with that. And that's been good. I'll say Craig was really good. Craig came at a great time for the city because we really needed some restructuring, and Craig is very black and white with everything. And
as most attorneys are.
yes. And so Craig is not a real touchy feely. I mean, Craig's going to make the right decision. If you don't like it, then tough, So Craig did some really good restructuring with, because at the end of the day, I could go to I remember our Mr. Haley, who was a very strong city manager. And I was young and arguably stupid young council member. And I remember telling Mr. Haley, hey, here's some things I'd like to see. And he's like, great, get 4 votes. That was his thing. Get 4 votes, So I think that's part of it's building consensus and having the relationship. And I've been fortunate with Rob, and Mr. Crumley was only there for a little while, but for Craig and Darren to have that relationship where we can be like, man, I'll always have your back if you're right, but you need to keep me and the council members in the loop. And so that's sort of the relationship we have. Darren builds I equate it to this. If you're like a bank board or a football team, the council is the ownership group. The city manager is the general manager of the football team. And then below that, you've got your offensive coordinator. So really the city manager is the general manager and the head coach. Mm-hmm. And then below that, you've got offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and that's really all of our department heads. And ultimately, the city manager is responsible to the ownership group, which is your city council. Right. And it's having that good relationship, which we've been blessed to have.
That's good. Well, let's kind of look ahead. I mean, obviously we alluded to next year's kind of an election year. So what you also alluded to earlier, kind of things that you still want to see happen. So why don't you share a little bit with, maybe even if you could wave a magic wand and, the next 4 or 5 years, you'd love to see X, Y, and Z happen. What are some of those things?
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, Cherry Lane would be a big one. Thompson Lane, getting that one finished. Highway 96 widening, Highway 99, the third phase is getting ready to start. So I think those infrastructure projects are significant in making sure that those get done. I think continuing our water and sewer, we've got a water and sewer expansion for our plant that we're working on. We've worked really hard with TDEC on the oxygen dilution. I'm not going to go into all that, but that's a big one. Solid waste is a huge one on making sure that we come up and we have different plans on, this is what's next for our community on solid waste in our community. Yeah. And that's been, over the last 3 or 4 years, really longer than that. I mean, I've had 2 elections that I've run on. I mean, I've been very upfront on what I think needs to happen with the landfill and what our next steps as a community need to be. And hopefully the county's coming on board with that now. I think you're starting to see that tide is turned on really getting away from the landfill. Yeah. I mean, it's 2025 and we shouldn't be burying trash in our community next to our water source. I mean, I sure would like to think in the late 80s that we would have handled that differently. Yeah. So I think that's a big issue to get that done. And then, from there, we've got Veterans Park that's going to be done in 2026. The airport is a big issue that MTSU will be relocating in 2027, making sure that we follow through and get that done. So those are all, there's numerous issues that we've sort of got on. I've got this big board in my office, like priorities, and we, short-term and long-term that we work through and keep doing that.
When you think about outside of infrastructure, what are some other things that you would say, whether, you mentioned Trader Joe's, that was something. So what, is there like kind of a next Trader Joe's, whether that's, I don't know what it could be, but is there some sort of industry or something that you guys, at least that you could maybe talk about?
No, I mean, we're continually working with groups. I mean, you and I have discussed this numerous times with different organizations. I really think job creation is still a major deal in our city.
Yeah.
And, you know, the office market is no longer there. You know, the corporate market, trying to recruit these corporate jobs, I mean, that is extremely tough.
Yeah.
And it's tough for us because it's really a catch-22, because the 123 acres that we have out on 840, and by the way, for anyone who's watching this, I'm not a defeatist. I mean, I'm the glass half full guy.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, you talk about things that make me mad, and when people talk down about Murfreesboro, that we're not good enough, I mean, it infuriates me. It makes me like, hey, we'll show you.
Yeah.
So I think recruiting those larger corporations, it's much tougher. And honestly, it's hard to compete with Williamson County, because at the end of the day, I know we say this, that, you know, they're looking for quality of life, but when you start seeing these large corporations, the CEOs and their families and their leadership, I mean, they're going to pick where they want to live.
Yeah.
And you know, our housing stock for a lot of those major corporations is not as good as what Williamson County is. We're getting a lot better.
Yeah. So
what typically has happened is those groups relocate somewhere else, and then all their people live here and they drive back and forth.
Right.
And so we're trying to combat that. The other thing I think it's important is, you know, you look at our major industries that we have in the community, healthcare being a significant one, MTSU being one, the automotive industry. I think with the tariffs that Trump's put in place, I'm not going to get on the political side, but I had a meeting with some representatives with Nissan last week, and they were like, look, they were getting ready to shut these lines down and move these lines to Japan at Nissan, and now they're not. They're coming back here. Yep. And so I think you're going to see some of that transition back. So I really would like to see, like, for example, that 840 area, I think an advanced manufacturing and tech corridor would be a big deal to have in that area. So those are some of the things that we're still trying to focus on. That, look, you can live here and you can work here. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wrap up, what would you say to some young folks that are, or maybe anyone necessarily looking to jump into the political arena? What's some advice that you would give them?
Be careful what you wish for. No, I would not go back, and I would go back and change decisions that I've made, because I think I'm a lot more experienced than I was, 4 years ago. I learned so much, like we're talking about, learned so much through COVID, and it's just like, as you get older, you just learn more. So I would, my mom and dad always, really stressed about, to my brother and I, to treat people the way that you wanted to be treated. Mm-hmm. So, and it's, maybe I've always had that chip on my shoulder, that coming from a place like Grundy, like I get really upset, or not upset, I get frustrated when people, talk bad. They, probably like you, when you tell them where you're from, they're like, you're from Grundy County? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm proud that I'm from there. Yeah. There are good people that are there. My family still lives there. Yep. And there are good people everywhere. There are bad people in different communities. So I think I've always had that chip on my shoulder that, I'm not good enough. I'm not, and that's sort of that political and entrepreneurial spirit is like, I get, we've had all these discussions with the landfill, and I think you and I talked about this, that, I'm going to run again in 2026. I think this will be my last time. That'll be 4 terms, and the landfill people are already trying to get somebody to run against me, just because they want that landfill situation is not done. Right. So, I think I've always had that. Not a joke. I tell Ashley, I'm like, Ashley, I think I've lived a good life. I didn't high school do bad stuff, college didn't do bad stuff. I think I've, but there's no telling what, dirt you'll get drug up on you now that, so I think that's the fighter aspect that you want. Would tell a young person, you got to have a little bit of crap to you, that you're not afraid to be secure and like, hey, this is the decision that needs to be made, and it may not be a popular decision, but it's the right decision.
Yeah.
I mean, the easiest decision, man, like talking about this landfill, I mean, how much easier would it have been just to say, sure, man, let's expand that thing.
Yeah.
That's more money for the city. That's more money for the county, but it's not the right decision.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part, I think. Like, I've got 21-year-old boys now. I've got a 12-year-old boy, and told you coached his assistant coached the middle school team this year. And that was one of the things that really stressed a lot of these young men that we're coaching is the easy decisions are not always the right decision.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand as a young man, you know, standing up to be able to say, look, it's not right that you're doing this to this kid. You're not bullying this kid. I mean, that's the people you want to raise. And so I would say that as someone wanting to get into elected office, one, it's not what you think it is. It's a lot tougher. But the other part is that you've got to be secure enough. And for me, it's my faith.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that God put me in this position for a reason, especially when it gets tough. I mean, you know, you can't rely on yourself. So I think those are the things I would try to relay to the younger group.
Yeah.
We need people. We need people to be active.
Got to have thick skin.
I would say that's I don't get too frustrated anymore with, you know, what I mean, I'm pretty much an open book, and I think after so long of doing this, I've lost my political filter that I can be able just to say, no, that's not right. It was funny, man. I was on the baseball field the other day, and it like, you can't make this up. So Bill Shacklet and I are coaching a team together, and Ben Wilson was there, and there was this dad that was on the baseball field. And we were like, hey, it's our turn to practice. And he was like, y'all need more, we need more baseball fields in Murfreesboro. And I'm like, yeah, we sure do. You know, and he didn't know I was the mayor. And he said, you know, yeah, and the thing I've noticed is that soccer park out there, you know, I understand the mayor has kids playing soccer, and that's why they've gotten everything. And I was like, well, that's not right. And he said, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I'm the mayor, and there's my kid right there. He doesn't play soccer. He plays baseball. So anyways, it's not what you think all the time, but I do say this, thick skin is part of it, but you know, you have to be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to laugh at some of the things that are about you and just try to set the example.
Yeah, that's good. Well, closing question we always ask everybody is, what are you currently reading or doing to further your personal growth and development?
Yeah. The funny part, you talk about during COVID, I was deathly afraid of flying. So I would have to medicate myself every time I got on a plane.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know why. I mean, I think it was a control issue, or I think it was I don't know. You know, like I just, you know, being in a tube that you can't see anything and you're worried about weather and, you know. Yeah. So, man, I said it was 2020. I was like, that can't be from God, you know. So I learned how to fly. And it's always the joke. Do you know how someone's a pilot?
How?
You just wait about 30 seconds after you meet them, and they'll tell you they're a pilot. Yeah. So I've moved from, I got my private in 2021. Then I've gotten my instrument rating, and I'm working on my multi-engine right now. Yeah. And that's really, I listen to a ton of podcasts. I mean, that's when I'm driving down the road going from site to site, I listen to a bunch of podcasts. That's sort of my reading, you know. But then what I've found, as we get older, we get stagnant, you know, and we don't challenge our minds. So that's what I did, is picked up flying. And now I'm just, you know, I'm working on my multi, then I'm going to work on my commercial single, it'd be commercial single, commercial multi, and then I'm just going to keep going with that, because it keeps me sharp. Keeps me pretty sharp. So that's what I'm working on. Well, Mayor, thanks for joining us. Anytime. Really enjoyed this conversation, and I know others will too. So. Yeah, enjoyed it, bud. Thank you for what you do. See you guys next time. Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.